You know, we always hear that phrase, think outside the box. But what if the problem isn't the box itself? What if the real issue is that we're trying to understand our complex three-dimensional world using a flat two-dimensional map? Today, we're diving into the work of futurist Heiner Benking and his incredible model for seeing our biggest problems with fresh eyes. And this quote from him really just nails it. Think about it. From school to our jobs, we're pushed to become specialists, to see the world through a really narrow lens. And that's valuable, of course. But when we're up against huge, messy problems like climate change or economic instability, well, a flat view just doesn't cut it. All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to unpack this whole flat world problem. Then we'll look at how to add that crucial third dimension. After that, we'll explore how to see from multiple perspectives, how to map out our thoughts, and finally, how we can use all of this to build better futures together. Okay, so let's get into it. What does it actually mean when we say our world is too flat? And maybe more importantly, how is this way of thinking holding us back on the stuff that really matters? Well, it really comes down to this thing called the silo mindset. We're all encouraged to become experts in our own little fields, which is great, but it can also trap us in these intellectual boxes. We get so focused on our own piece of the puzzle that we completely lose sight of the big picture and how everything connects. And hey, this isn't just some abstract theory. There's a perfect real-world example. Back in 1990, the German government got all of its top scientists in a room to figure out what to do about global change. The meeting immediately hit a brick wall. You know why? The experts, these brilliant minds, couldn't even agree on a simple definition of system Earth. Everyone was speaking their own specialized language, and the result was just gridlock. And here you can really see the difference side by side. On one hand, you've got siloed thinking. It's competitive, it's always looking for that one right answer. But the problems we face today, they demand a totally different approach. Transdisciplinary thinking. It's collaborative, it's holistic, and it embraces the fact that the best ideas come from weaving together many, many different perspectives. Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? How do we actually break out of these silos and add that missing dimension to our thinking? Well, Heiner Benking came up with this brilliant visual metaphor to help us do exactly that, the Rubik's Cube of ecology. And what's so cool about this is that it's not just a high-level theory, it's a hands-on tool. It's kind of like how an architect builds a little model of a house so the client can actually see and touch it. We can do the same thing with our most complex problems, whether we're using simple wooden blocks or some fancy VR setup. The goal is to make our ideas real, something we can all look at and talk about. So how does this cube work? It breaks down any big, messy problem into three simple axes. Just think of them as a set of questions you have to ask. First up, disciplines. Are we looking at this as a scientist, an artist, an economist? Second, magnitudes. Are we zoomed in on the micro level of an individual, the meso level of a community, or the macro level of the entire planet? And finally, time. Are we digging into the past, looking at the present, or exploring possible futures? So, having this three-dimensional model is a huge step forward, but it's not quite enough. A model is just a thing, right? You also need a method for actually using it. And that means learning to actively and intentionally shift your perspective and see the world through a whole bunch of different eyes. Benking called this the super observer mindset. It's about consciously stepping outside of your own default point of view. Seriously, think like a detective showing up at a crime scene. You'd never just stand at the doorway and call it a day, right? No way! You'd get down on the floor, you'd look up at the ceiling, you'd check every single angle. That's exactly what a super observer does with a complex problem. And this house of eyes gives us a really practical way to do that. The worm's eye view, that's when you're down in the weeds, looking at the tiny details. The fish's eye view, that's about seeing the currents, how things are flowing within the system. The bird's eye view gives you that big picture, strategic overview. And finally, the group eye view helps us see the problem through the lens of history, culture, and different generations. All right, so we've got our 3D model, we've got our method for seeing from different perspectives. But where do you put all this information so it doesn't just turn into a jumbled mess in your head? Well, that brings us to our next tool, the cognitive panorama. Benking had a great name for this, creating external workspaces of the mind. I mean, let's be real, our brains can only juggle so much information at once. So the idea is to get it all out of your head and onto a shared map. Could be a giant whiteboard, a virtual document, whatever. You create a space where everyone can see the same picture, debate it, and build on it together. And the process for this is actually super straightforward. It's just 3 steps. First, you observe. You use your super observer skills to gather info from all those different viewpoints. Second, you process. You analyze all that data internally. And finally, you map it. You organize your key insights onto that shared external space, creating your cognitive panorama. And the result of all this isn't just some fancy chart. Think of the cognitive panorama as more like a GPS for our collective thinking. It helps teams with totally different backgrounds find a common language, spot connections they never would have seen otherwise, and navigate their way through a complex challenge. It's a game changer for everything from brainstorming in a company to, seriously, high-stakes international peacemaking. So we've gone through the model, the method, and the map. But what's the point of it all? Where does this all lead? Well, it fundamentally changes our entire relationship with the future itself. And this is really, really important. The goal here isn't to become some kind of fortune teller who can predict the one inevitable future. The point is to create a shared space for a real conversation, a place where we can bring all our different perspectives to the table and start designing the kinds of futures we actually want to live in. You know, the old flat world way of thinking sees the future, singular, as this fixed destination that's just coming at us. It's like we're all on a train, stuck on a single track, and we have no choice about where we're going. It's something that just happens to us. But this new model completely flips that idea on its head. It encourages us to think about futures, plural. It's not one single track. It's a massive, wide-open landscape of possibilities, a landscape that we can and we must actively shape together. This all comes back to a really powerful idea at the heart of Benking's work, the ability to see the big picture, to understand your place in the world and the different paths you could take. That's not some academic luxury. He argued it's a basic human right. It's the very foundation of a society where people can truly participate and have a say in their own destiny. So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. In a world that so often feels divided and stuck, just imagine, what could we accomplish if we truly learned to see our shared problems from every possible perspective? If we combined the wisdom of the worm, the fish, and the bird, what kind of amazing futures could we start building right now together?